Hey there. Imagine the hush of a city before sunrise, stone walls pressing in close, and the faint promise of secrets stitched into every garment. Tonight, you'll slip into the world of Byzantine sumptuary laws, a place where even the color of your sleeve could decide your fate. There's a moment coming when a single forbidden thread might upend your entire standing, and someone's about to pay the price for wanting just a little more. If stories of rules, rebellion, and the odd medieval injustice help you unwind, stick around and consider liking or subscribing. Only if you actually enjoy this kind of tale, though. Drop a comment with your city and the time. Let's make this a global bedtime gathering. Now, dim the lights, settle in, and let the smoky air of the past draw you under. You're about to find out what it really meant to dress for your class. Dawn, urban Byzantium. You, a merchant-class resident, are already awake, the wool tunic clinging to your skin. It's scratchy, never quite warm, and definitely not elegant. The color is brown, neither deep nor rich, just brown. You eye the boots by the door, shaped by years of your own steps. They're sturdy, but uninspired, the soles worn thin by cobblestones. The air inside your cramped home tastes of last night's fire and something sour, sweat lingering in the corners along with the smoke. Your family stirs, sharing this one room, huddled together for warmth and routine. You hear your neighbor muttering through the wall, lightly about the same thing you are. Why do the nobles get silk while you get wool? You step outside, boots thumping against the threshold. The street is already alive with familiar discomforts. The wool itches at your wrists, and your shoulders feel heavy, as if the fabric itself is reminding you not to get ideas above your station. In Byzantium, sumptuary laws are everywhere, even if you don't see them. They're in the fabric, the color, the cut of your clothes. They're in the way people glance at your tunic, deciding if you belong. The rules say you, a merchant, must dress plainly. No bright dyes, no showy patterns, and certainly no silk. Silk is for those with titles or fortunes, not for someone who counts every copper coin and every meal. You make your way to the market square, the stone streets echoing with the clang of a distant bell. The air is thick with the smell of bread baking, mingling with the sharpest scent of livestock and the omnipresent undertone of smoke. You pass a noblewoman, her gown a shock of crimson and gold, the fabric catching every ray of light. She glides past you, her chin high, the velvet trailing just out of reach. For a moment, you wonder what it would feel like to be wrapped in that softness. But envy is dangerous here. The sumptuary laws are not just about fashion. They're about keeping people in their place, making sure the world knows who is who and who is not. You reach your stall, a small wooden structure wedged between a baker and a tanner. The merchant beside you, Marcos, is already setting out his wares, muttering about the latest price of wool. You nod, adjusting your tunic, and glance around. It's easy to spot the newcomers. They look at the nobles the way you do, with a mix of awe and something sharper. But you know better than to let that show. The laws say you can't wear purple, not even a stripe. Purple means imperial, it means power. And if you so much as try, you could face a fine or worse. You remember the story of a neighbor who tried to pass off a violet sash as just faded blue. He spent a week in the stocks for his trouble, a living warning to anyone else tempted by color. The market square is alive with noise, but not for you. Every jingle of coins, every rustle of silk is a reminder of what you're missing. You trade in woolen cloth and barley, counting each sale, always careful not to draw too much attention. The baker's son, a boy with quick hands and a quicker mouth, sidles up beside you. "Did you hear?" he whispers. "Lady Anna's daughter was seen wearing a gold-trimmed belt. She's only a merchant's wife. The patrols are looking for her." You glance at your own plain belt, leather-cracked and ordinary. The idea of gold feels as distant as the emperor's palace, yet you can't help but imagine the weight of it around your waist. For a moment, you wonder if you could get away with a little extra color, maybe a brighter thread hidden in the hem. But you know better. The patrols are thorough, and the penalties are real. Fines, public shaming, or even the stocks. Your ambition bumps up against the hard wall of tradition, and you tuck your dreams away with the rest of your forbidden thoughts. The clamor in the square suddenly shifts. A group of guards, armored glinting, stride through the market. They stop by the tanner's stall, inspecting a young woman's cloak. Someone whispers that it's too fine for her status. You watch as the guards question her, their voices low but firm. The crowd draws back, silent and watchful, everyone suddenly aware of their own clothes. You feel a prickle of fear. It's not just about fashion, it's about staying invisible, about not giving them a reason to look your way. The guards move on, but the tension lingers. Marcos lets out a long breath. "It's getting stricter," he says. "Last week, they fined a baker for wearing green. Said it was too close to noble colors." You nod, knowing that green is supposed to be reserved for wealthier merchants, never for peasants or tradesmen. The rules don't always make sense, but they don't have to. They're not about logic. They're about control. You wonder how many people have paid the price for wanting something a little nicer, a little brighter, a little more comfortable. Your mind drifts back to home. The one-room hut, the crowded corners, the endless struggle to stretch every loaf of bread. You remember your mother telling you why you ate so much porridge and so little meat. It wasn't just poverty, it was policy. The authorities set rules to stretch food supplies, to keep famine at bay. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it just meant more hunger. As the sun climbs higher, the market grows busier. The cobblestones heat up, and the air fills with the sizzle of roasting meat. A rare treat you can only smell, not taste. Nobles stroll by, their laughter bright and sharp, the swing of their velvet sleeves almost mocking. You envy their comfort, their freedom to choose, but you also see the weight they carry, the expectation to stand out, to be seen, to never blend in. It's a different kind of prison, maybe, but a prison all the same. Suddenly, a commotion erupts near the fountain. A merchant's apprentice, not much older than your own son, is surrounded by a small crowd. His tunic, a little too fine, a little too blue, has drawn the wrong kind of attention. The guards are back, and this time they're not just asking questions. They strip the apprentice of his tunic right there in the square, leaving him shivering in his underclothes. The crowd watches in silence, some with pity, others with relief that it isn't them. The lesson is clear. The rules are not suggestions. They are boundaries, drawn in thread and dye, and crossing them has consequences. You look down at your own clothes, suddenly grateful for their plainness. The itch of the wool is nothing compared to the sting of public shame. But the envy lingers, a low burn in your chest. You wonder how many others feel the same. How many dream of silk and colour, of a life less ordinary. The sumptuary laws keep you in your place, but they can't quite crush the longing. Back at your stall, Marcos hands you a scrap of cloth. From the west, he says, eyes darting. They say it's linen, soft as a whisper. You run your fingers over it, marvelling at the smoothness. For a moment, you imagine a world where you could wear such a thing openly, without fear. But you tuck it away, knowing it's safer hidden. The rules aren't just enforced by guards. They're enforced by neighbours, by gossip, by the ever-watchful eyes of the city. As the bells ring out noon, you pack up your unsold wares. The day's heat presses in, and the air is thick with sweat and smoke. You trudge home, boots heavy, shoulders bowed. The sumptuary laws may be invisible, but you feel them in every step, every glance, every choice you make. They shape your world as surely as stone and fire. At home, your family gathers around a simple meal. You share stories of the day, careful not to mention the guards or the apprentice. The children listen, eyes wide, absorbing every detail. They know the rules, even if they don't understand them. Tomorrow, they'll put on their own scratchy tunics, and the cycle will begin again. You lie awake long after the fire has died, the room dark and quiet. The wool still itches, the envy still burns, but sleep comes eventually. You dream of colour, of softness, of a world where clothes are just clothes and not a cage. But for now, you wake to the same rules, the same boundaries, the same heavy brown tunic. The market square will buzz again tomorrow, full of noise and colour for some. But you'll be there, hemmed in by rules you never chose, wondering what price you might pay if you dare to reach for more. Market square, late morning. You, one of the merchant class, are already sweating under your itchy wool tunic. The stone beneath your feet is uneven, the air thick with the scent of smoke, sweat, and the faint promise of something fried. Stalls burst with cabbages, apples, and the occasional salted fish. But everywhere you look, colour is rationed. Your own reflection in a puddle shows drab brown and sun-faded blue, a palette designed for blending in, not standing out. You tug at your sleeve, rough against your skin, and try not to stare at the real spectacle. A pair of nobles gliding through the chaos, their silks shimmering green and gold, like dragonflies in the sun. Their velvet sleeves glint, catching every stray sunbeam and every envious eye in the square. You look away, staring too long at such luxury is a surefire way to be noticed, and not in the right way. The bell clangs above, a sharp reminder that time is money, and you have little of either. Your neighbour, a barrel-chested baker named Stuard, elbows past with a muttered curse. Saw the reeve this morning. Find a miller's wife for a bit of fancy trim, he grumbles. The gossip is everywhere. Someone tried to pass off shiny linen as silk, and now half the square is whispering about her shame. You wonder if anyone else feels the same sting. The rules are as clear as the morning bell. Nobles can wear silk, and in this city's laws you, regardless of how fat your purse might get, are barred from it. Silk is more than a fabric. It is a passport, a badge, a velvet rope you are not allowed to cross. You finger the edge of your own sleeve, wishing it were softer, lighter, anything but this heavy, scratchy wool. The dye is uneven, a muddy brown that stains your fingertips. You remember learning young, wool for peasants, linen if you are lucky, but never velvet, and certainly never silk. It is not just about cost. The laws are written and enforced. Looking wealthy, even by accident, is like stealing the dignity of those born above you. It is as if your body itself is a crime scene, every seam and patch a piece of evidence. A merchant's wife was made to stand in the square, her forbidden trim displayed for all to see, and the laughter that followed was sharper than any blade. She had to pay a fine, but the true cost was in the stares that lingered for weeks. The colors are rationed too, the richest purples, a shade so deep it seems to hum in the sunlight, are reserved for royalty alone. You have never seen purple like that up close. Only rumors and the rare glimpse at the emperor's procession. Even burgundy or emerald, if too bold, can be grounds for suspicion. The rules are enforced by everyone, reeves, neighbors, even the old women who sit by the well and note every new hemline. You catch yourself longing for just a hint of color, something to break the monotony of grays and browns. Instead, you blend in, as intended. Your home is no refuge. You sleep on straw, the smell of smoke clinging to your clothes and hair. At night, the world closes in. Curfew is strict, and the only light comes from the flicker of your hearth. Nightlife, in the way you imagine it, dancing, feasting, or even a stroll beneath the stars, is an illusion for people like you. The city locks down, and you listen to the distant echo of bells marking the hours. You wonder if you will ever taste the freedom that seems to come so easily to those wrapped in velvet. Sometimes envy bites sharper than hunger. You pass a noble woman, a robe edged in forbidden purple, and for just a moment you dream of rebellion. What if you wore her colors, her silk, her jewels? The fantasy is fleeting. The punishment for such trespass is real. Fines are heavy, but shame is heavier still. Occasionally, the authorities make an example. You remember the story of a peasant caught wearing a dyed sash, paraded through the market with the offending garment held aloft. The laughter followed him home for months. This is how order is kept, not with swords, but with glances, whispers, and the ever-present threat of ridicule. You step aside as a velvet-clad nobleman passes, his boots spotless despite the muck. He barely glances at you, but you feel the invisible wall. The sumptuary laws are not just written in decrees. They are stitched into every interaction, every sidelong look. You know your place, and so does he. The rules keep the world in order, or so you are told. Yet you cannot help but notice how the world always seems to tilt in favor of those above. Your friend, Petter, once joked that he could buy a velvet cloak if he sold enough grain. But you both know it is not about money. The laws say you cannot rise too far, too fast. If you do, the world will notice, and not kindly. Your comfort, your ambition, even your very identity are all hemmed in by tradition. You dream of a day when the rules might loosen, but for now you settle for surviving. Each morning brings a fresh reminder, the bell, the wool, the endless sea of drab colors, The sizzle of envy as silk swishes by is just part of the music of daily life. The market square never truly quiets. Bells ring, gossip spreads, and the rules remain as constant as the stones beneath your feet. You are seen, but only as the sum of your permitted threads. Somewhere in the crowd, a noble woman sweeps past, her robe edged in a purple so deep it almost hums. Market Square, late morning, you and 100 others pressed shoulder to shoulder between stalls, all eyes darting toward the shimmer in the crowd. A noble woman sweeps by, her robe edged in purple so deep it might as well be velvet thunder. It is not just color, it is a declaration. You try not to stare. The sun catches the hem, and for a moment you see the dye glow, almost humming with the promise of power you will never touch. The hem alone could buy your neighbor's entire stall. You know the rules. If you so much as finger a scrap of that forbidden purple, you could be fined, shamed, or worse. The law does not care if you simply fancy yourself grand for a day. Purple is not just fashion here, in late medieval Europe. It is a wall, as solid as the city's ramparts, and you are on the outside. Your own tunic hangs heavy on your shoulders, spun from wool that is as itchy as a bad conscience. The color is best described as mud with aspirations. Everyone in your class wears earth tones, not by choice, but by decree. If you want to buy a splash of crimson or even a whisper of blue, the merchant will eye you like you just asked to borrow his wife. There is a reason for that, and it is not just tradition. The sumptuary laws slice through the market like a knife, separating what you want from what you are allowed. A noblewoman's purple is a fortress. Your brown is a sentence. You duck through the crowd, the smell of sweat and wood smoke swirling in the air. The market sizzles with envy, real, hissing envy, when a noble's velvet sleeve brushes too close. You hear a whisper behind you that's imported. Italian, maybe. You glance back, but there is no mistaking the tone. It is admiration cut with resentment. You would give anything to own a strip of that fabric, but the law has already decided your ambitions for you. A bell clangs in the distance, echoing off the stone. It is not a church bell. It is the signal for the city's fashion inspector to begin his rounds. You freeze, heart hammering. The inspector's robes look crisp, his eyes sharper than his quill. He moves through the stalls, occasionally pausing to finger a merchant's sleeve or examine a customer's hat. You force your hands to your sides, suddenly aware of every patch and stitch. If you are caught with so much as a border of silk, the fine could cost you a month's bread. The inspector's gaze sweeps past you, and you let out a breath you did not know you were holding. The stakes are not just about comfort or pride. They are about survival. One mistake, one flash of color, and your standing in the city could vanish like smoke. The rules are everywhere, written and unwritten. You remember last winter, when your cousin tried to pass himself off as a minor official by adding a silver trim to his cloak. The inspector's men made him parade through the market, cloak turned inside out, while children jeered. He has not tried it since. You still see the shame in his eyes when he walks past the purple-robed nobles. You reach for a loaf at the baker's stall. The baker's wife eyes your tunic, checking for forbidden trims. She nods, barely. You hand over coins, feeling the rough edge of envy scrape your skin. It is not only colors that are off limits. Certain types of cloth, silk, velvet, even finely woven linen, are reserved for those higher up the ladder. You have heard of tailors caught stitching silk linings into merchant coats, only to be fined so heavily they lost their shops. The law is not subtle. It is a hammer, and you are the nail. Halfway down the street, you spot a group of monks hauling barrels into the back of their stone monastery. The scent of preserved fish wafts out, sharp and oily. It is fasting season, and everyone is supposed to abstain from meat. Of course, the monks have a monopoly on preserved fish, and business is booming. You have heard stories, plenty of them, about peasants sneaking a bit of sausage here and there, risking both sin and penalty for a taste of something forbidden. The laws are everywhere, shaping not just what you wear, but what you eat, what you dream, and what you dare to envy. The monks count their coins, robes swishing, while the rest of the city lines up for a scrap of salted cod. You pass a wooden house with straw poking through the roof, smoke curling from a crooked chimney. Many poorer homes are built this way, timber and thatch, easily burned and easily rebuilt. You remember last year's fire, the way it roared down the street, turning houses to cinders in a single night. The stone buildings of the wealthy still stand, untouched and smug. The rest of you patch and rebuild, always just one spark away from having nothing. A sudden shout erupts from the far side of the square. Two men circle each other, eyes wild, fists clenched. It is not a brawl. People whisper about an ordeal by combat, the sort of last resort they tell of in the West. The crowd surges around them, hungry for spectacle. Here, when words fail, rumor travels faster than proof. The winner is said to be favored by God himself. You watch as the men trade blows, sweat flying, the clang of fists echoing off the stones. One falls, the other stands, chest heaving. The crowd cheers, but you feel only the weight of the law pressing down like a second skin. You slip away, the smell of smoke and sweat following you home. Your house is small, the walls patched with old boards, the hearth cold. You hang your tunic by the door, careful not to let the sleeve brush the coals. The memory of the purple hem lingers, bright and impossible. The law has decided who you are, and the world enforces it with every glance, every snicker, every clang of the inspector's bell. You sit by the window, watching the last rays of sun catch on the distant towers. Somewhere, a noble woman laughs, her voice bright as glass. You wonder, just for a moment, what it would feel like to wear that forbidden color, to walk the market with your head held high. The thought is dangerous, but it flickers in your mind all the same. The law cannot reach your dreams, at least not yet. The city outside settles into night, the air thick with the promise of more rules, more boundaries, more silent rebellions. Somewhere in the market, the inspector's bell clangs again, echoing over the stone and wood. A reminder that tomorrow will bring the same walls, the same choices, the same hunger for something more. The crowd parts as a fashion inspector, robes crisp, expression sharper, makes his rounds. People whisper about an ordeal by combat, the sort of last resort they tell of in the West. Here, when words fail, rumor travels faster than proof. Market Square, late afternoon, Constantinople's stone streets humming with the low drone of barter and bell clangs. You are sandwiched between a barrel of turnips and a neighbor who smells like boiled cabbage and ambition. The air is thick with the scent of smoke and sweat, and something sharper, maybe envy, maybe the faint tang of crushed herbs underfoot. A merchant's daughter, her dress a bit too blue for her father's status, tries to blend into the crowd, eyes darting as if color alone might betray her. The crowd parts as the inspector arrives, robes crisp, face set in the sort of frown that promises someone's afternoon is about to be ruined. You hold your breath, feeling the scratch of your plain wool tunic against your skin. It's the same tunic you have worn all week, and the color, best described as mud with delusions of grandeur, couldn't possibly offend the emperor's dignity. Still, the inspector's gaze lingers just long enough for your heart to stutter. He inspects your hem, fingertips brushing the fabric with a disdainful flick, searching for a forbidden trim or a splash of color you know you cannot afford. Someone else isn't so lucky. A young man, Gregor, a Clark's son, stands frozen, his cloak seized for being woven too fine. The inspector holds it aloft for all to see, announcing the fine with a flourish. Laughter ripples through the square, sharper than any blade. Gregor's cheeks burn redder than the forbidden dye in his cloak's lining. You tighten your belt, grateful your wool is plain, but the humiliation hangs in the air like smoke. That's what enforcement looks like, public, communal, and as much about shame as about money. It isn't merely a rule on parchment. The sumptuary law lives in every side-eye, every whispered warning, every shared glance when something is just a little too nice for a merchant's child. The law is supposed to keep everyone in their lane, and it mostly works. But every so often, someone tries to blur the lines. Your own ambition, that quiet itch just beneath your skin, is checked every time you walk through the square. You see a noblewoman in velvet, her sleeves trailing like banners, and you wonder, just for a moment, how it might feel to wear silk against your arms instead of this perpetual itch. Night falls early, the curfew bell echoing off the stone. The market dissolves into shadows. You hurry home, boots thumping, the sound swallowed by the dark. There's no nightlife here, not for you. Curfew keeps the streets empty, and the only light comes from torches sputtering at the corners. Even if you wanted to sneak out in borrowed finery, there wouldn't be an audience to admire you. The city is a patchwork of locked doors and dreams deferred until morning. Inside, your home is plain and tight. The fire burns low, smoke curling along the rafters. You strip off your tunic, scratching at the red line the wool leaves on your neck. No good soap to spare, just cold water and a rough cloth. Clean is a relative term here. You scrub and hope for the best. The luxury of scented baths is as distant as Constantinople's throne. You sit by the fire, the day's humiliation lingering like the taste of old bread. You remember stories of peasants sneaking meat on fasting days, hiding scraps beneath bread or slipping bits of sausage into stew. Monasteries profit from these lapses, selling preserved fish at a premium when meat is forbidden and demand is high. The rules are strict, but the loopholes are lucrative. The church profits, the merchant profits, and you, well, you eat what you can, when you can. You wonder if anyone ever gets away with wearing silk under wool. A secret luxury against the skin. Maybe someone does. Maybe someone is bold enough to risk a fine for the feeling of softness. But the risk is real. Fines, public humiliation, even imprisonment if you push too far. The memory of Gregor's burning cheeks is a warning. The city is watching, always. The laws don't just shape your wardrobe, they shape your dreams. You weigh every purchase against the risk of being noticed. A splash of color might mean attention you cannot afford. The wrong shoes could cost you a month's wages. Even a scarf in the wrong shade could end in shame. One day, a whisper spreads through the market. An inspector's cousin was caught with forbidden dyes. Suddenly, the laughter feels dangerous, and you wonder who will be next. The line between enforcer and offender blurs for a moment before snapping back. The rules are rigid, but the people who enforce them are not immune. You lay awake, the city quiet except for the occasional clang of a bell far off. You think of silk, of velvet, of colors brighter than lamp flame. You think of ambition, yours and everyone else's, pressed flat beneath the heavy hand of tradition. You fall asleep to the sound of your own breath, the smell of smoke, and the scratch of wool against your skin. Tomorrow will bring another round of inspections, another day of watching what you wear, of dreaming of a life just out of reach. The stakes remain, your comfort, your pride, and your place in the world, all measured in thread and cloth. You never forget the rules, but you never quite stop wanting to break them either. Market Square, late morning, you and a dozen townsfolk pressed shoulder to shoulder among crates and carts. You glance down at your boots, sturdy, shaped like your own feet, scuffed but functional. Across the square, a noble's shoes curl into absurd points, nearly as long as a loaf of bread. Poulaines, a Western fashion they're called. They serve no purpose except to say, I don't work. You can't help but smirk, one puddle, and those shoes are doomed. Still, they're a badge of status, a walking signpost of what you can't have. Your boots, meanwhile, keep you grounded, literally and socially. In short, even your toes are subject to medieval Europe rules, marching you away from the world of the rich. Every step you take, you feel the scratch of wool against your ankles. The fabric is thick, heavy, and dyed the color of old dishwater. It smells faintly of sheep and smoke. The air in the square is thick with that same scent, mixed with the sharper tang of spilled ale and the constant underlying musk of sweat. Your neighbor, a fellow merchant's apprentice, shifts from foot to foot and mutters about the price of barley. But your eyes keep drifting to those poulaines, gliding over cobblestones like swans on a pond. Never mind that the noble's toes must be freezing. The point is, everyone knows who's allowed to glide and who's expected to trudge. You catch the eyes of a town guard, his gaze darting between the crowd and the noble's shoes. The guard's own boots are as plain as yours, though polished to a shine. He stands a little straighter for the noble, but you notice him side-eyeing a young baker's apprentice whose cuffs are suspiciously bright blue. Blue, of course, is for those with titles and land, not for boys who spend their mornings elbow-deep in dough. The rules are everywhere, stitched into seams and hammered into soles. They tell you, every time you get dressed, exactly how far you can dream. You try not to stare, but envy sizzles beneath your skin. It prickles like the itch of your woolen hose. There's no escaping it. The color, the cut, even the length of your shoes are policed. Nobles in this town can wear silk, and sometimes you catch a shimmer at the edge of your vision, a flash of violet or green that you know would feel like water against your skin. You wonder what it would be like to slip into something forbidden just once. But then you remember the stories, public shaming, fines, a morning standing in the church porch with everyone's eyes on you, as if your clothing had become a confession booth. The bell clangs from the church tower, echoing against the stone walls and bouncing off the market stalls. A dog barks, startled. You check the sun, midday. Time to haggle for supper. You push through the crowd, careful not to scuff your boots any more than you have to. The cobbles are slick with the remains of last night's rain, and you can't help but imagine a noble trying to tiptoe through this mess without snapping an ankle. It almost makes you smile. But the stakes are real. Break the rules, and it's not just your toes on the line. Your ambition, too. You've heard of apprentices fined half a year's wages for daring to wear a strip of velvet. Others have been forced to stand for hours in the cold, reciting psalms while the town whispers and snickers. The sumptuary laws are more than a dress code. They're a fence, built from fabric and pride, hemming you in as tightly as the laces on your boots. At home, the story is the same. You step through the low door, ducking beneath hanging onions and the lingering haze of smoke from the morning's fire. Your mother is bent over the hearth, stirring a pot of barley and carrots. Meat is rare, reserved for feasts or for those with land. Most days you eat what the fasting laws allow, creative dishes built from grains, vegetables, and the odd handful of dried peas. The smell is earthy and comforting, but you can't help but envy the roast geese and honey cakes rumoured to grace a noble's table. Even your meals are a reminder of what you're not allowed. You sit at the table, boots still on, and listen to the street outside. There's a commotion. A velvet merchant, his cart piled high with forbidden fabric, has set up shop at the corner. Nobles and their stewards crowd around, fingering the cloth, haggling in voices loud enough for everyone to hear. The merchant's apprentice, a boy your age, glances over at you with a smirk. He knows you won't be buying. Not unless you fancy a fine or a lecture from the town council. The fabric glimmers in the afternoon light, a river of colour you're forbidden even to touch. You brush a fleck of soot from your sleeve and imagine what it would be like to walk through the market draped in silk, boots curled into points, every eye turning as you pass. Would you feel powerful or just ridiculous? The rules are supposed to keep order, but all they really do is keep you dreaming about another life. The sound of the merchant's laughter drifts in through the window, light and mocking. You tighten your grip on your spoon. Outside, a group of children runs past, their feet bare and muddy. They shriek and laugh, chasing a chicken that has escaped from the butcher's stall. No one bothers to stop them. Rules about shoes don't apply if you have none. You watch them go, envy mixing with a strange kind of relief. At least you have boots, even if they're plain. At least you know where you stand. The sun dips lower, shadows stretching across the market square. You hear the distant clang of the city gate as it closes for the night. Inside, your boots are drying by the hearth, stiff with mud and sweat. The velvet merchant packs up his wares, his cart lighter now, the forbidden colours tucked away out of sight. For tonight, at least, The boundary between noble and commoner feels a little less sharp. But tomorrow, when the bells ring and the world wakes up, the rules will be waiting. You lace up your boots, pull on your scratchy wool, and step out into a world where every detail of your dress tells a story, one written by someone else. The Pulanes will glide by again, absurd and enviable, and you'll smirk, knowing that in this city, even your toes have a place on the ladder. The smoke and sweat will cling to you, a second skin, as you navigate your daily ambitions, always aware of the line you cannot cross. Just as you start to drift towards sleep, the memory of those pointed shoes returns. Maybe, you think, the real luxury isn't silk or velvet or shoes shaped like a question mark. Maybe it's the chance to walk your own path, even if it's through mud and market grime, boots scuffed but steady. Tomorrow, the velvet merchant will pass again, and you'll be watching, still dreaming, still grounded, still waiting for the rules to change. Market square, midday, you among vendors and townsfolk. The velvet merchant is back, trundling his cart through the chaos of the city centre. His wheels creak over cobblestones slick with the residue of last night's rain. You are close enough to see the velvet's deep sheen, the way it seems to soak up sunlight and send it back out, richer. For a moment, you let your hand drift toward the fabric, just a brush, just to see if it's as soft as it looks. But before your fingertips touch, the memory of last week's market humiliation yanks you back. A neighbour, caught fondling a bolt of crimson silk, was forced to parade the square wearing nothing but sackcloth, a warning to all. Aspiration is for the nobility, not for the likes of you. You settle for the familiar scratch of your own woolen tunic. It is drab, unyielding, and smells faintly of last winter's smoke. Your neighbour's story is not unique. Sumptuary laws are everywhere, like the smoke that clings to your house and hair. The rules are posted at the church door and shouted by officials at dawn. Velvet and silk are strictly reserved for those with titles. Anyone else caught buying, wearing, or even coveting them risks fines, shaming, or worse. The nobles say it is for your own good that luxury corrupts the peasantry. But you can see the truth. It's about keeping you in your lane, maintaining the rickety ladder of medieval society, rung by rung. You have coins in your pouch, hard-earned from long days hauling barrels and tallying debts. They could buy you a slice of velvet, but the law says your ambition is the real crime. The town's hierarchy is stitched into every thread you wear. If you look too fine, the Lord Stuard will notice. A single misplaced button, a flash of forbidden colour, and suddenly you are summoned before the magistrate. Public shaming is just the beginning. Repeat offenders find themselves stripped of their goods, their reputation, or their freedom. As you weave through the stalls, the sizzle of envy tickles your ears. The velvet merchant's clients are easy to spot. The soft-spoken scribe whose cuffs gleam, the perfumed wife of a minor noble, her laughter ringing over the clatter of the market. You catch their glances as you pass. There is a calculation in their eyes, measuring your worth, your obedience to the dress code. You feel the wool itch more fiercely. How can a simple fabric draw such lines between people? A bell clangs from the stone tower, echoing through the square. It is not yet curfew, but everyone knows what the bell means. A noble procession is coming. You step back, flattening yourself against the wall. The merchant's cart vanishes into a side street, velvet hidden beneath a drab canvas. The nobles sweep by, silks and velvets flowing, boots gleaming. You watch, half in awe, half in resentment. Their world is as distant as the moon, yet it floats past you every day. You return home that evening, hands raw, stomach rumbling. Your house is a single room, the air thick with the scent of smoke and boiled cabbage. Light flickers from a stub of tallow candle. You try to read the day's accounts by its jaundiced glow, squinting at the page. Sewing at night is even harder. The needle pricks your finger more often than the thread hits its mark. If only you could afford a better lamp, or the leisure of daylight hours. But the laws keep you working late and living rough, just as they keep you wrapped in scratchy wool. The next morning, the market is abuzz with gossip. Someone was caught with a strip of velvet sewn into their collar, hoping, perhaps, to sneak a little softness into their day. The penalty is swift, a fine so steep it will take months to repay. You hear the story repeated in snatches, at the baker's stall, over the wash basin, in the smoky tavern corners. Each retelling grows more dramatic. In some versions, the culprit was paraded through the streets. In others, he was forced to rip the velvet from his own tunic with trembling hands. The message is clear. Even small rebellions are dangerous. You wonder, not for the first time, who these laws really serve. The nobles claim they are protecting the social order, that peasants like you would waste your meagre earnings on frivolous luxuries if left unchecked. But you have seen the truth in the greedy eyes of merchants and the anxious glances of townsfolk. The rules are less about virtue and more about keeping the classes apart. Velvet is not just warm and soft. It is a badge of belonging, a ticket to a life you are forbidden to buy. At times, your frustration boils over. There are stories of peasants who tried to break the rules, who hunted in the Lord's forest for forbidden game, or tried to slip into a noble's feast wearing borrowed finery. The punishments are legendary. Fines are the mildest outcome. Some lose a hand, or worse, their lives. The priests sometimes step in, interpreting the results of trials, so no one dies over a stolen rabbit or a hidden scrap of silk. But not always. You pass a group of children playing in the gutter, their laughter rising above the din. One wears a hat made from a scrap of blue cloth, brighter than anything you own. For a moment, you envy his freedom, his ignorance of laws that will soon press down on him, too. You remember being that young before you understood that the world was measured by fabric and color. The afternoon wears on. The market square grows quieter, the air thickening with the smell of roasting meat and acrid smoke. You catch sight of the velvet merchant again, this time arguing with the city guard. The guard fingers the merchant's wares, eyes narrowed. You can almost taste the tension, sharp as vinegar. You slip away, heart pounding. Even witnessing these little dramas is risky. The nobles do not want witnesses. They want obedience. You return to your work, shoulders hunched, wool prickling at your neck. The day ends as it began, with you on the outside, looking in. The sun sinks behind the rooftops, casting the city in gold and shadow. You hear the curfew bell toll from the stone tower, warning all but the privileged to get inside. Tomorrow, the velvet merchant will return, his forbidden cargo hidden beneath rough cloth. You will pass him again, envy sizzling just beneath your skin, and the itch of your woolen tunic will remind you that, in this city, even your comfort is a privilege you cannot buy. Many poorer homes are built this way, timber and thatch, easily burned and easily rebuilt. The roofs are posted at the church door and shouted by officials at dawn. Market Square, Constantinople, dusk. You are walking briskly, feet aching in shoes that never quite fit, as the curfew bell clangs from the looming stone tower above. The sound is a thick iron note, echoing off the narrow alleys and catching in your chest, a reminder that in the Byzantine world, even the hour you go home is not your own. Your hands are rough, your tunic is wool and plain, and the air is already thick with the scent of smoke and the promise of another long, comfortless night. You hurry past stalls shuttering for the evening. A merchant grumbles as he sweeps up the last wilted greens, muttering about the nobleman who bought all the best apples for his hounds. The clang of the bell comes again. It is not just a suggestion. The law says you must snuff out your fire, close your door, and leave the streets to the rats and the rich. Your neighbor, old Nikos, leans out of his window and hisses, "Cover your fire, or the patrol will fine you." You nod, heart thumping, and clutch your cloak tighter. Not that your cloak is much to look at, thin, brown, and scratchy, like every other respectable non-nobles in this part of town. The word curfew itself is a leftover from the French couvre-feu, literally, cover the fire. It is less a gentle suggestion and more a threat dressed up as advice. If you are caught with a chimney still smoking, you risk a penalty that could swallow a month's wages. The law does not care if your children are cold, or if you have a cough that only eases with warmth. The bell tower itself stands as both a warning and a symbol. Every evening, its bell signals the end of freedom and the beginning of enforced order. You duck into your one-room home, ducking under a timber beam, and the door creaks shut behind you. The space smells of sweat, wool, and last night's cabbage soup. Your family huddles together on the only bed. You share this hut with everyone, your spouse, your children, and sometimes, when luck sours, a distant cousin. There is no privacy, only the dull ache of proximity and the constant itch of your woolen tunic. You would give anything for a little comfort, but comfort is for those who live on the hill in houses of stone. You bend to smother the fire, watching the last orange embers fade. The room grows colder, but the law is clear. No flames after the bell. You wonder, not for the first time, if the nobles truly follow the rules. From your window, you can see faint glimmers from their tall houses. Perhaps their fires burn all night, tended by servants, the laws bending like reeds in the wind. Your mind drifts to the market, to the morning when you glimpsed a noble striding past in a robe of velvet, so blue it seemed to swallow the light. His shoes, absurdly long and pointed, curled up at the toes like a jest, the mark of someone who has never cleaned a stable. Pointy shoes, known as poulaines, aren't for you. Not that you could afford them. Still, the sight stings. Your own shoes are little more than patched sacks, and every step reminds you of your place. The sumptuary laws decree it. Only the elite may flaunt such extravagance. Once, You saw a merchant's wife fined for daring to wear a band of dyed silk at her sleeve. She wept as the city guards cut the offending thread, their faces stony with the satisfaction of those who keep order. The crowd watched, silent, as if the fabric itself were a crime. You felt a strange satisfaction. She knew the rules, after all, but also a pang of envy. If only you could risk such rebellion. The curfew bell has not only hushed the market, but has also crushed the last hope of evening gossip. In the day, you might gather news, share a joke, or barter for a better price. Now, the streets are empty except for the occasional shadow of a patrol. The silence is its own kind of oppression, broken only by the distant bark of a dog, or the echo of boots on stone. As you settle on the hard floor, you remember tales of ordeal by fire, another sort of medieval justice. The priests would press a hot iron to the accused, and if the wound healed clean, innocence was declared. You shudder at the thought. These are laws that burn, literally and figuratively. Every rule, every restriction, is a scar that marks your place in the world. At times, the rules seem almost comic in their cruelty. Nobles can hunt hundreds of deer in a single morning, feasting and boasting while the rest of you pick over thin stews. The sumptuary laws are not just about clothing. They are about keeping the feast on one side of the wall and the hunger on the other. If you dared to dress above your station, the punishment could be swift and humiliating, public shaming, a hefty fine, or worse. It is not just about what you wear. It is about who you are allowed to become. The room is now dark. Your children whimper, wrapped in thin blankets. You listen to the city breathing through stone and wood, every sound amplified by the hush. You think of the silk and velvet you touched once, just for a moment, before the merchant snatched it away. The memory is sharp as a needle. The rules are everywhere, in your clothes, your food, your fire, even your dreams. The city outside is not truly still. Somewhere, a noble's laughter floats on the night air, muffled by distance and privilege. You wonder what it would be like to sit by a fire that never goes out, to wear shoes that make walking a pleasure rather than a trial. The thought is dangerous, but you cannot help it. Every law is a door, and you are always on the wrong side. You drift into uneasy sleep, wrapped in scratchy wool and silent frustration. The curfew bell lingers in your ears, a reminder that tomorrow and every day after, the rules will still be there. The stakes remain. Comfort is for the few, obedience for the many. You wonder, just before sleep takes you, if anyone ever truly escapes. Outside, the city waits for dawn, a new day, a new set of limits. You dream of saving enough to buy a finer cloak, maybe even a flash of color at the collar. Market Square, late afternoon, you and a handful of neighbors jostle past crates of limp vegetables and bristling fish. The bell clangs overhead, echoing against stone walls, the sound a reminder that time, like fashion, is strictly rationed here. Your cloak itches. It is a heavy, drab wool with the color of old porridge, and the collar shows only the faintest attempt at blue, just enough to hint at hope, not enough to provoke suspicion. You have dreamed of better. In the market, the sizzle of envy is almost audible as a merchant's daughter sweeps by in a shawl edged with what might be real silk. She moves quickly, eyes fixed ahead, as if the fabric itself might betray her. You clutch your coins and eye a bolt of cloth from the Levant, dyed a red so deep it almost hums. The merchant catches your gaze, winks, and whispers that this fabric is fit for a duke, but a bargain for the brave. You almost laugh. Here, bravery gets you more than a bargain. It can buy you a public shaming. Not even a clever nickname, just the village crier, reading out your offence while children point and snicker. That's if you are lucky. The unlucky are fined so hard their next meal is boiled weeds. Looking wealthy when you are not is considered theft of noble dignity. Literally, theft, not of coin, but of status. Your neighbor, Magda, made that mistake last season. She had scrimped for months, skipping the morning bread, selling a handful of spoons to buy a length of silk for her daughter's wedding. The silk shimmered in candlelight, the closest thing to magic you'd seen outside the church. The nobles did not see magic, only insolence. By the week's end, Magda had paid a fine twice the cost of the silk and stood in the square while the town's idle gossips made a meal of her ambition. The fabric itself was confiscated. She sold off her best wares to cover the loss, while her daughter married in a cloak even plainer than yours. The air in your home is thick with the smell of smoke and sweat. As you pick at your supper, some lentils, a heel of bread, you think about how these rules hem in more than your wardrobe. They hem in your hopes. The stone walls of your rented room press close, and the only color comes from the fire's embers. Outside, you hear the bell again. Curfew. Nobles, of course, live in thick-walled houses and can ignore the curfew bell if they please. Their windows glow with candlelight long after you have barred your door and doused your flame. For you, night brings more rules. The bell is not just a sound, it is a boundary. You sometimes imagine what it would be like to slip past those boundaries, to wear a cloak of velvet, to eat white bread instead of rye, to linger in the street after the bell. But you know better. Every glance from a noble, every murmur in the market, is a reminder, stay in your place. The rules are written in proclamations nailed to the church door, but they are also stitched into every coat and apron. The sizzle of envy is everywhere, and every attempt to rise above your station is met with suspicion, sometimes worse. Once, you saw a baker's apprentice taken for ordeal by water. He was accused of stealing a scrap of dyed cloth, something forbidden to his class. They tied his wrists, muttered prayers, and tossed him into the river. If he sank, he was innocent. If he floated, he was guilty. The crowd watched, silent, except for a few who whispered that the real crime was wanting more than one share. The boy came up coughing and shivering, his innocence as wet as his clothes. It was a lesson for all who saw it. The city's sumptuary laws are a patchwork of do's and don'ts, but the real lesson is simple. Comfort is rationed, dignity is reserved, and ambition is dangerous. Even your food is regulated. On certain days, the market sells no meat, only salted fish, beans, and the hard crusts that pass for bread. They say this helps stretch supplies and keep famine at bay. If you are caught eating forbidden foods, the punishments range from a scolding to a fine, to a long public penance. No one wants to be the one kneeling in the mud outside the church, reciting prayers while their neighbors smirk. The bell tower in the square is more than a clock. It is the city's heartbeat, reminding you not just of time but of place. of class, and of who is watching. Each clang signals a shift. The market closes, the streets empty, and the nobles retreat to their feasts. You pull your cloak tighter, feeling the scratch of the wool against your neck. The urge to rebel flickers, but you swallow it down. The risk is too high. The rules are not just for show. They are enforced with a kind of comic injustice. You have seen a potter fined for a splash of green glaze, a cobbler shamed for shoes with too many buckles. Sometimes you wonder if the nobles ever envy you. Maybe they do, in some twisted way. After all, their lives are just as bound by expectation, just gilded. But the difference is clear. When they break the rules, they change the rules. When you break them, you pay. The city is full of locked doors, and every key is kept far out of reach. You finish your meal, the taste of smoke lingering on your tongue, and listen as the last bell echoes down the narrow street. Night settles in. The walls close tighter. Yet somewhere in the shadows you imagine a future with more color, if not for you, then for those who come after. The rules may hem you in, but your dreams, stubborn as they are, still press against the seams. Marketplace, late morning. You and a cluster of townsfolk, plus a noblewoman gliding past in a violet cloak that nearly hums with disapproval. You are elbow-deep in a barrel of onions, the itch of your wool tunic competing with the sharper itch of envy, as that violet flash catches your eye. The noblewoman's shoes glint, polished and pointed, stitched with a thread you could never afford. She sweeps past the stalls, her scent a faint mix of rose water and superiority. Heads turn, mouths press thin. You feel the unspoken question ripple through the square. What is she doing here, where the air tastes of onion skin and sweat? You try not to stare, but the color alone, violet, a forbidden shade, burns itself into your memory. Your own sleeves are the color of boiled mutton. Your neighbors look like weak old porridge. The rules here are clear, if not exactly fair. Nobles wear silk. Merchants, if lucky, settle for a scrap of linen and pray the dye takes. Everyone else makes do with what is left, coarse, rough, and always brownish. You have heard the stories. A woman fined for a crimson hem, a man forced to stand in the square with his tunic turned inside out, shame flapping in the wind. The bell in the tower clangs above, marking another hour. You are not allowed to dream too boldly. It is not just your eyes that hunger. Your stomach rumbles, and a butcher's stall taunts you with plump sausages and glistening hams. But today is a meatless day. Again. Nearly half the calendar is marked for fasting. Stretching your patience and your belt with each passing week, you glance at the fishmonger, whose salted cod looks more like punishment than prize. The rules are strict. No flesh on these days, not even a hint of dripping fat. If you are caught breaking the law, the penalty is more than a slap on the wrist. Fines, public shaming, or a forced march to the church for penance await the greedy and the desperate. You shuffle your feet, feeling the filth of the street grind into your shoes. The bells ring again, a harsh reminder that curfew is not far off. The town's bell tower looms overhead, its shadow crawling across the square. When darkness falls, the clang signals not just the end of business, but the start of another kind of watchfulness. The city gates will soon creak shut. You have seen it before. A merchant caught past curfew, dragged before the council, forced to pay with his purse or his pride. Someone beside you mutters, too low for the noblewoman to hear, "One day I'll buy a ribbon in blue, just to see if they notice." The words hang in the smoky air, half challenge, half joke. But everyone knows the consequences. The rules are not a game. The council's eyes are everywhere, and informers are all too eager. You imagine for a moment what it would feel like to wear a flash of gold thread, or to taste roast pork on a forbidden day. The longing is as sharp as the smell of spilled vinegar on the flagstones. The merchant across the way, Petros, you recall, has a reputation for quiet rebellion. His hat, a shade too bright, draws glances from the older women. He shrugs off the whispers, but you have heard rumors he sometimes buys rabbit from the poachers in the woods. The risk is real. Poaching is a crime, but hunger makes for bold choices. It is said Petros was once caught with a snare and forced to kneel before the council, a sack of fur at his feet. He paid his fine, but his pride was another matter. Now he walks with a limp, and some say the woods are richer for his absence. The lesson is not lost on you. Envy, you realize, is not just a feeling. It is a smell, a sound, a color you are forbidden to wear. It sizzles in the air each time silk rustles or gold glimmers in the sunlight. The laws press in on you, as real as the stones beneath your feet. You are reminded with every bell and every rule that your place is set. Comfort and ambition are luxuries. You measure in inches, not leaps. The market square is a stage, and you play your part in drab costume, hoping no one notices the longing in your eyes. Home is little relief. The smoky haze inside clings to your clothes, the taste of boiled cabbage lingering long after supper. You scrape the last of the bread, wishing for butter, or better yet, cheese. But cheese is scarce, and butter rarer still. You think of the noblewoman's table, roast fowl, fresh greens, honey cakes. Your own meal is a study in monotony, punctuated by the scrape of tin and the sigh of resignation. Sometimes you wonder if anyone truly believes the rules keep order, or if everyone simply fears chaos more than shame. The laws are supposed to keep the peace, to remind each person of their place. But the market hums with quiet rebellion. A ribbon here, a stolen egg there. The council cannot see everything. Still, you know the cost of being noticed. A gust of wind rattles the shutters, carrying the distant clang of the bell. Another day, another set of boundaries. Your ambition is hemmed in by custom, your comfort by law. You glance once more at the violet cloak in your mind's eye. The image lingers, a thread of color in a world of brown. You tell yourself it is enough to imagine, for now. You settle into your cot, the straw poking through the thin blanket, and listen as the city winds down. The smell of smoke seeps into your dreams, mingling with visions of silk and forbidden feasts. In the dark, envy is silent, but never sleeps. Not everyone plays by the rules. Marketplace, late afternoon. You and your neighbor Dimitra at a stall selling thread. The bell clangs, echoing against the stone, and you flinch a little. Not from the sound, no, you're used to the clangor, but from the sight of the town inspector, sweeping his gaze across the crowd. His eyes hang on fabric, not faces, which tells you everything about the Byzantine sumptuary laws in action. You tug your sleeve down, hoping the faded blue doesn't catch his notice. It's legal, just barely, but you've heard stories of people fined for less. The wool itches against your wrist, rough and stubborn, clinging to the sweat of a long day. Demetra leans in. She whispers, "See that merchant's son?" The trim on his tunic wasn't there last week. You glance, the boy's sash shimmers, a little too boldly for his class. You feel a sizzle of envy, not for the color itself, but for the audacity. Silk and velvet are supposed to be reserved for the elite. But every now and then, someone gets bold. Someone gets clever. Rumors swirl as thick as the smoke from the baker's chimney. You've heard of tailors who, for a little extra coin, will sew a strip of forbidden velvet on the inside of the collar. Only you and your skin will know it's there, soft, cool against the neck, a secret rebellion. Some merchants have friends at the city gates. They slip luxury cloth into shipments of onions or dried fish. The inspectors, noses wrinkled at the smell, never bother to dig deep. But the risk is real. Last year, a weaver's apprentice was caught selling sashes dyed with a forbidden, richer blue. The city's dye inspector pounced. He always does, eager for a public example. The poor apprentice was fined more than a year's wages and forced to wear a plain grey smock for 6 months. It's not just money or shame at stake. A single mistake can brand you, quite literally, as an outsider. At home, the rules don't loosen. Your mother grumbles as she picks at a hem. If I had one bolt of real silk, just once, she stops herself. She said it before. Silk is for nobles, and you are not one of them. The law says so. The law says who you are by what you wear. Even your dreams, it seems, come in drab colors, but not everyone bows to the letter of the law. There's an undercurrent in the city, a hum you can feel beneath the bell and bustle. Tailors, smugglers, and the occasional priest who looks the other way, all keep the gears of quiet rebellion turning. The priest at St. Anna's, for instance, is rumored to enjoy a bit of imported wine. He's less likely to notice if your sash is just a shade too bright during evening prayers. These small conspiracies stitch the city together, even as the laws try to pull it apart. There are tricks, too. You learn to layer. A forbidden trim can be hidden beneath a perfectly legal overcoat, only revealed in trusted company. Demetra's cousin once wore a pair of silk-lined gloves to a feast. She kept her hands tucked in her lap all night, but the memory of that softness lingered for weeks. The gloves, of course, vanished after one evening. Too risky to tempt fate twice. Still, the city's inspectors are nothing if not persistent. They appear at odd hours, sometimes alone, sometimes in pairs, always with eyes sharper than their quills. One afternoon, a rumor flies through the market. Someone's been caught wearing a hat with gold thread. You feel the collective intake of breath, the tension that stretches from stall to stall. Everyone glances at their own sleeves, their own dull hats. The city feels smaller, tighter, with every new restriction. Inside your home, the smell of smoke and sweat sticks to your clothes. There's little soap, not the kind that truly cleans, and certainly no miracle cures for the rashes that come from rough wool and endless grime. You scratch absently at your collar, wondering what it might be like to slip into linen or even silk. But linen is for wealthier merchants. Silk, well, that's the stuff of dreams, and of the upper class. Nobles can swan about in silk robes, their sleeves trailing like banners, while you are left to scrub itchy wool by candlelight. Every rule spawns a loophole, and every loophole dances on the edge of disaster. You know one merchant who had a hidden pocket sewn into his tunic. He kept a square of velvet there, a talisman, or maybe just a dare. He'd take it out and rub it between his fingers in private, grinning. Then, one night, he forgot to hide it. The inspector saw. The fine was steep, but the real punishment was the gossip that followed. Sometimes the rebellion isn't about cloth at all. It's about who gets to be seen. The city's curfews keep most people indoors after sunset. For you, nightlife is a dream, not a reality. There are no lantern-lit strolls, no midnight feasts for the merchant class. The only ones who dare the streets after dark are nobles, guards, and those with something to hide. You press your nose to the window, watching the last flickers of torchlight fade, and wonder if the city feels freer at night or just emptier. The next morning, the market is buzzing again. Someone's been fined for a sash, someone else for a hat. The inspector struts, pleased with his tally. You and Dimitra trade glances. It's a reminder. Every ambition, every attempt to rise is watched. The laws are not just about cloth. They are about keeping the world in its place. Yet, you notice, the more rules there are, the more ways people find to bend them. The baker's wife suddenly has a new scarf, much too nice for her station, but she claims it was a gift from a distant cousin. Who can prove otherwise? The city's energy thrums with the push and pull of restriction and rebellion. One day, as you walk home, you hear laughter from an alley. Two boys compare tunics, each boasting a hidden detail, a stitch of red, a sliver of velvet. They are careful, but not careful enough. The inspector rounds the corner, his eyes narrowing. You hold your breath. But today he is distracted by a commotion at the far end of the street. The boys slip away, their secrets intact, at least for now. You exhale, feeling the tension drain from your shoulders. For a moment, it feels like victory, but you know the stakes remain. Every forbidden thread, every secret lining is a wager. The cost is more than coin. It's your standing, your safety, your place in the city's story. And yet, the city's heartbeat never slows. The bell clangs again, echoing off the stone, calling everyone back to the market square. The smoke hangs heavy, the wool itches, but beneath it all, there's a current of hope. Maybe tomorrow someone will find a new loophole. Maybe you will. The game goes on, and the rules only get trickier. Sometimes enforcement tips into farce. Market Square, late afternoon, you and a handful of neighbours. The air tastes of burnt bread and possibility. You're eyeing a stall of rough-spun cloaks, minding your own business, when a commotion starts by the well. You know that sound, the clop of official boots, the rising murmur, the sharp clang of the town bell echoing off stone. In the middle, Poor old Nikos the baker, arms pinned, is being hauled by 2 guards. His tunic, usually plain brown, is now inside out, seams and patches on full display. The crowd clusters, hungry for drama. You edge closer, heart thudding with a mix of curiosity and dread. This is what happens when a man gets ideas above his station. Nikos, they say, added a strip of blue velvet to his cuffs, barely a thumb's width. But velvet means trouble. The officials bark out his crime, parading him in a slow circle. His face is flushed, sweat slicking his temples. Every laugh from the crowd lands like a slap. You catch a whiff of the baker's shame, as real as the yeasty tang still clinging to his sleeves. You'd think a patch of forbidden color was a threat to the city walls. But here, dress codes are sacred. Velvet is for the councilman, not for hands that need dough. The officials puff up, all righteous spectacle. This is law, not logic. You watch, half amused, half horrified. Nikos shuffles by, eyes fixed on the couples. The lesson is clear. Step out of line, and you might as well paint a target on your back. A child tugs your sleeve, giggling. You force a smile, but inside, you're thinking of your own coat. The hem is fraying, but you'd kill for a bit of color, not that you'd risk it. The last thing you need is to join Nikos's parade, tunic inside out, dignity in tatters. The fear is as scratchy as your woolen collar. The show isn't over yet. The town crier reads a list of other crimes. A butcher caught with a silver clasp. A merchant's wife in suspiciously fine linen. The punishments vary, but the theme is always the same. Humiliation served with a side of public theatre. The crowd laps it up. Justice, they call it. But you know a farce when you see one. The officials love a spectacle, and the people love a scapegoat. You wonder who will be next. The market's mood shifts after the parade. People gossip in low voices, eyes darting to sleeves and collars. You feel the pressure, invisible but heavy. Every choice, what you wear, how you walk, becomes a gamble. The bell tolls again, and you flinch, half expecting your name to be called. You breathe in, the smell of smoke and sweat grounding you in the moment. This isn't justice, you think. It's theatre with stakes. At home, you run your fingers over the rough edge of your cloak. The urge to rebel simmers, but so does the memory of Nikos's humiliation. You imagine what would happen if you dared to stitch on a scrap of silk. Maybe you'd look important for a day, but the risk is real. That sizzle of envy you felt in the square, everyone feels it. Everyone wants more than the law allows. The rules are everywhere, shaping your life in small, bitter ways. Even your boots, plain, sturdy, shaped like human feet and nothing more, remind you that comfort comes second to conformity. You've seen what happens when someone tries to stand out. The cost is public, painful, and designed to stick. You tug your cloak tighter and try not to think about the possibilities. Sometimes the absurdity of it all hits you. Today, a velvet cuff. Tomorrow, a baker's parade. Once, you watched as a poacher, caught with nothing more than a rabbit, was dragged through the same square, accused of a crime as serious as treason. The officials made an example of him too. The lesson was always the same. The line between dignity and disaster is thin. and the rules are written to keep you on the wrong side. You wonder, not for the first time, how anyone can rise when every step up is met with a slap down. The memory lingers as you prepare for evening. The sun dips behind the rooftops, casting long shadows through the window. You light a tallow candle, the smell of smoke curling into the air. Down the street, laughter echoes, someone retelling the tale of the baker's parade, no doubt. You try to laugh along, but the joke wears thin. The officials may have their theatre, but you have the itch of wool and the ache of envy. You settle by the fire, cloak wrapped tight, and think about tomorrow. The stakes are simple. Keep your head down, or risk becoming the next act in the city's ongoing comedy of errors. Outside, the bell rings once more, a reminder that the game goes on. Night falls, and you're back in your scratchy wool, dreams of silk just out of reach. Market Square, Byzantium, late evening, you, a merchant-class hopeful, listen as the bell in the tower tolls curfew, the sound vibrating through stone and bone alike. Your day has been spent under the itchy tyranny of wool, your only legal armor against the chill and, more importantly, against the ambitions that threaten to peek out from underneath the law's heavy cloak. The air is thick with the scent of smoke and sweat, and envy sizzles as you watch a noble glide past in velvet, their hem trailing just inches from the mud. You hurry home, careful not to draw attention. In this city, even walking too proudly in a tunic, the wrong shade of blue can spark suspicion. The sumptuary laws are clear. Silk for nobles, linen if you can afford it, and wool for everyone else. The rules are enforced with a kind of bureaucratic zeal that would make even the most dedicated modern parking attendant blush. You remember the case of old Nikos, who dared to wear a crimson sash at the festival last spring. The fine nearly cost him his bakery, and the shame stuck longer than the smell of burnt bread. Inside your home, 1 part wood, 1 part hope, and all parts highly flammable, you settle by the fire. The walls, patched with scraps of fabric and ambition, do little to keep out the cold. You run your hand over the rough weave of your tunic, wishing just for a moment that it was the soft smoothness of silk. But that's for the people in the stone houses, the ones who laugh a little too loudly when the curfew bell rings, knowing that few rules really apply to them. The city outside doesn't sleep so much as it waits. Stone alleys are empty, shadows flicker, and every creak of timber could be the watchman, eyes sharp for anyone daring enough to flout the dress code. That bell you heard earlier, not just a bedtime signal. It's the city's way of snapping shut the great book of daily ambition, locking everyone into their assigned chapter until morning. You think of the stories, some true, some whispered, about those who tried to rise above their station. There was the merchant's daughter who was caught in a borrowed velvet cloak, paraded through the square as a warning, or the apprentice who wore shoes with silver buckles, only to have them confiscated and replaced with wooden clogs that squeaked embarrassment with every step. The city remembers such things. It has a long memory, stitched together from the small rebellions and the swift public consequences. Your own ambitions are stitched just as carefully. You dream of someday trading enough to afford a house with stone walls, less risk of fire, less risk of losing everything to the next stray ember. But the laws don't just protect the rich from your competition, They protect them from your aspirations. Every thread of your tunic is a reminder of where you belong. Every color you are forbidden to wear is a line drawn on your future. Sometimes you wonder what would happen if you simply ignored the laws for a day. Would the world end if you stepped into the market in a hat just a little too fine? You imagine the uproar, the gasps, the pointed fingers. Maybe, in some twisted sense, it would be worth it just to feel silk brush your skin, even for a moment. The thought is gone as quickly as it comes. The risk is too real, the shame too lasting. The city is a stage, and the costumes are not yours to choose. The fire flickers lower, casting long shadows that dance like old ghosts around your feet. The smell of wet wool is sharp in your nose, and you hear the distant clang of the watchman's bell echoing off the stone. You remember, with a wry smile, the tale of the duel fought under the old law of ordeal by combat. The accused and the accuser, both dressed in the dullest brown, swinging wooden swords at each other in the square. The winner declared favored by God and, sometimes, by luck. The absurdity of it all nearly makes you laugh. Nearly. But laughter is a luxury, like silk. You have seen what happens when people forget their place. The fines, the shunning, sometimes worse. The city's order is as much about fear as it is about fashion. The rules are a wall, not just between you and a better tunic, but between you and a better life. The barrier is as real as the stones in the noble quarter, and twice as cold. You let your head rest against the uneven wall, feeling the roughness of timber and the rougher truth of your place in this world. The urge to rebel is a low, constant itch, never quite satisfied, never quite safe to scratch. The room smells of smoke, sweat, and the faint hope that tomorrow might bring change. Outside, the city is hushed. Behind every shuttered window, someone else is nursing a small dream, held in check by the same invisible threads. The bell has long since stopped ringing, but its echo lingers in the streets and in your chest. The fire's glow fades and the night presses in. You wonder if things will ever be different, if the urge to dress for the life you want will ever outweigh the fear of what you might lose. But for tonight, you pull your scratchy wool tight, wrap yourself in the comfort of survival, and let the dreams of silk drift just out of reach. The city sleeps, each resident sealed into their station by law and custom. The rules may have faded with time, but the human urge to rise, to reach, to rebel, those never truly go out of style. If you have ever longed for something just beyond your grasp, then you know a little of what it meant to live under the Byzantine sumptuary laws. And as the embers die, you realize the story is not just history. It's woven into every wardrobe, every ambition, every quiet hope that tomorrow will let you be just a little more than what the law allows.